Good afternoon. Happy early voting day to everyone. Um, my name is Charlie Davis III. I am the Director of Student Life at Tallahassee Community College, and I would like to thank you for joining us for our Civic Education virtual series. Today we are joined by Mr. Thomas Whitley, who is the Chief of Staff for the Mayor here in Tallahassee. The purpose of our Civic Education series is to educate, inform, and discuss the fundamentals of the levels of government. Today, we're blessed to have local government as our kickoff. So Mr. Whitley will talk about the local government and how it functions and their role and how they intertwine with our state and federal government at the same time. And then we'll open it up for questions and answers. So just feel free to chime in. The chat feature is open for those that are present and utilize. And at the same time, if you feel free to unmute yourself if you have a question at the same time. Sorry about that, repeat myself. So at this moment, I would like to introduce Mr. Thomas Whitley and let him have the floor and share his information about local government.
Great, thank you. First, let me thank you, Charlie and TCC, for putting this on. I think this is wonderful. Doing I think good work to educate students in the broader community on the different levels of government that we have, the different functions, and the different kind of roles and responsibilities, and how they all play in into how they work together, right, and play into each other, and the things that we experience day in and day out in our daily lives that we may not fully even understand. So I am Thomas Whitley. I am the Chief of Staff for Mayor John Dailey in Tallahassee, which Charlie said. And it's a fun job. I have not always been in local government or in politics. I came out of academia. Actually, I have a PhD in religion. Which is a whole nother conversation, right? So I have a whole different background that in some ways I think has prepared me quite well for what I do. And in some ways, people may think is completely irrelevant to my work. But so, I've had to kind of be a student of local government myself over the past few years since we've been in office about 2 years. And so I've been in local government just a little longer than that period of time. So it's been a learning curve for me too. The thing that I think is most important for folks to know about local government is that it's the government that's closest to the people, which will sound cliche, but there is a near zero chance you will see your member of Congress, especially your senator, perhaps one of your House of Representatives, when you're in public shopping, right? Or walking in the park. And with your local government leaders, your mayor, your city commissioners, your county commissioners, your school board members, it's hard not to run into them, particularly in a city like Tallahassee. We have 200,000 people live inside the city limits, but we still have this kind of really small town feel, right? Which I like, right? Because we have I think the amenities of a large, medium-sized city where you still are really well connected and really know a lot of people. Tallahassee is the capital of Florida, which is the third largest state in the union. And we are the seventh largest city in the state of Florida. And so those of you that may spend time in Tallahassee or grew up in Tallahassee, you may think, hey, this is like a small town, but it's not in Florida. There are 412 cities in the state of Florida, and Tallahassee is the seventh largest. All right, so I think that's important to kind of keep in perspective. And so local government's going to look different here than it does in other cities, for sure, other counties. The average city in Florida, I think, has about 15,000 residents. And so that's probably where, obviously TCC gets a lot of students from Tallahassee, but I know that a lot of students are from other parts of the state and, of course, some other states as well. And so, I think it's important to kind of keep that perspective, right? Realizing that the way local government functions here are going to have a lot of similarities to other places, but there will be some differences. So, I'll give some high level stuff real quick, and then we'll open it up for questions. I think that probably a more effective way to, maybe get at what questions that folks have and answer things I actually care about as opposed to whatever I happen to want to talk about, right? So here locally, we're a bit unique in that Tallahassee is in Leon County, and we have one city and one county. Most counties are going to have multiple cities. Franklin County, for instance, if you spend time at the beach at St. George Island or something, there are two cities in Franklin County, Apalachicola being one of them. A lot of people from here probably spend time over in Apalachicola, maybe for the Seafood Festival or something. So that's but you can have some counties down south that will have one county and 32 or 33 municipalities, right? So the dynamics are going to be different. So we're a little bit unique in that we only have one city and one county here, which in a lot of ways is really good because we can do a lot of things together, working jointly. And so if you've heard of Blueprint, it's a penny sales tax that we had for 20 years. It got re-upped, and the next 20 years started this year in 2020. And so it's a 1 cent sales tax, a penny sales tax to fund growth, infrastructure development, economic development in our community. And so the city and the county are able to do that together so that we can align our priorities in ways that help everybody in our community, because a lot of people here, there are a lot of people here who, for all intents and purposes, live inside of Tallahassee, but may just not happen to be inside the city limits. But they're still part of our community, right? So being able to work together jointly with the county, I think, is important. So the city and the county both operate under what's called a kind of a council management form of government, where that means that you have your elected body that kind of sets the policy and the kind of the driving framework, and then you have an appointed manager or administrator that runs the day-to-day operations, right? So if you think about it like a business, the city commission or the county commission are the board of directors, and then our city manager, or on the county side, the county administrator would be the CEO, right, who runs the day-to-day operations. So the electeds, they set the policy, kind of a high level, 30,000 foot level. They make the policy direction, and then they hire people to implement that and run the day-to-day operations. So at the city, we have a city commission which has 5 members. One of them is the mayor. So the mayor is directly elected, but is known as what some would call either a leadership mayor or some would call a weak mayor. And that would be as opposed to a strong mayor. And that isn't talking about, how much he can bench press. We'll leave that determination for a later date, but it's talking about the kind of the authority and the power that the mayor has. So the mayor sits on the commission, runs the meetings as the official kind of spokesperson, liaison for the government in the city of Tallahassee. But the mayor has 1 vote on the commission, just like the 4 commissioners have 1 vote on the commission, and the mayor doesn't have a veto. A lot of people tend to think of mayors like just basically the governor of your city, right? So we have a governor of the state who is elected and is the chief kind of administrator or chief executive of the state. And in some cities, that's the case. That's typically larger cities will have what's called a strong mayor form of government like that, and then some that are smaller don't. There have been conversations going back decades about whether Tallahassee should have a strong mayor. In the past, Tallahassee has had a rotating mayor, but the form that we have now is a directly elected mayor with 4 commissioners, and then they have 4 appointed officials that they hire to run the day-to-day operations. So the city manager, the city attorney, the treasurer clerk, and the auditor, which we've now just transitioned into an inspector general's office. And the county is similar in that they have 7 members on the commission. 5 are in districts, so geographic districts, and then 2 are at large. So they run countywide, and then they have 2 appointed officials there, county administrator and then the county attorney. And then we actually have a couple other forms of local government here that I think tend to get overlooked. The first major one is the school board. And the school board has 5 members. They are all districts, right? So you live in a particular school board district, and then a superintendent. And interestingly, the superintendent is the only kind of strong mayor form of government that we have in Tallahassee. So the superintendent is elected to be the chief executive for the school district. So you've got the city government, you've got the county government, you've got the school board, and then we have a couple other um, you know, elected officials, some that we'll call constitutional officers that are directly elected. So the sheriff, the clerk of the court, property appraiser, the supervisor of election, and the tax collector are kind of our constitutionals. And then of course we do elect judges and things like that. And then we also have another group of local governments, technically local governments, that are community development districts. And so these would be districts that would come together in a certain, smaller geographic region they may have an additional tax for additional amenities. And so some developments you could think of, like Southwood, Piney Z, some of these kind of maybe larger development neighborhoods around Tallahassee you may be familiar with, they'll have their own community development districts. So they'll elect people to kind of make some, specific decisions there locally. So we don't talk about those a lot, but those are a form of local government. In the city, and because I spend a little bit of time at the county, but the city is what I know the best. And I think one major point for people to know about kind of the responsibilities that we have is that the city owns our own utilities, right? So your electricity, your gas, your solid waste, and then your water and sewer, we own and run and operate all of those at the city of Tallahassee. So when you walk in, you get up in the morning and you turn the light on, go in your bathroom, that's electricity coming from the city of Tallahassee that we generate. A significant portion of it from our two solar farms that we have out at the airport. When you turn the water on, that's water that we are providing, that we are treating to make sure it's clean, safe drinking water for you. When you roll your garbage out, if you live inside the city of Tallahassee, we are the ones facilitating that. When you flush your toilet, you expect it to do what it should do when you flush it, and we manage that, we clean that, and we appropriately dispose of that to make sure that we're not doing anything to harm our groundwater or the lakes and the streams and the creeks we have nearby, a lot of which flows ultimately into what we call springs. And that's a really important environmental feature that we have. And so we have spent a lot of money and energy and effort over the years making sure that what we are doing, and stormwater we can talk about too, right? Runoff from storms, that we're not negatively impacting, having negative environmental impacts over that. So we own and operate all of our utilities here, which is not it's not completely common for cities to do. And so I think that's an important kind of distinction that we have here. And then of course we have our kind of community services, right? Police department, the fire department, those are ours. EMS is operated by the county because they're kind of the official healthcare arm of the state. They operate some parks, though they typically do more passive parks, whereas we operate parks and recreation, so we have more kind of active recreation in our parks. I think people are surprised to hear that we have right about 90 parks inside the city limits of Tallahassee. So this is 2020. Tallahassee turns 200 in 2024. And one of my main goals is for the city to reach 100 parks by 2024. So 100 parks by our 200th anniversary. I think, honestly, I would have gone for 200, but 200 by 200 is, it sounds better. It's just going to be impossible to create 104 or 110 more parks in the next 4 years. But 100 parks, which I think is just kind of amazing, right? It speaks to the quality of life that we have here. And so one more example of the things that we're involved in that you might not think is we have an urban forester on staff at the city of Tallahassee, and we have an urban forest master plan because we pride ourselves in our natural beauty and our trees. We know that these are things that help with the health of our community, help with the physical and the mental health of our community, and that also help us to continue to combat climate change. And so our canopy and the health of our canopy is very important. So we employ an urban forester on staff and a number of arborists, certified arborists that work on our staff to care for trees, right? So we kind of do, one of the beauties of local government is you can do just about anything that you want to do. So we employ an urban forester, we employ engineers and planners, we employ, bus drivers, right? We have mechanics that work on our fleet of, light duty vehicles, kind of small trucks, and that work on our buses, right? So kind of heavy duty, large. We have folks that run our underground utilities that operate a front end loader, right? Or that, may operate a machine to pave the road, right? So essentially anything you want to do, you can probably find a job with the city of Tallahassee doing that, or with the county, or with the school board doing that, because it's so varied. We have to do, you're kind of involved in so many areas. So I will stop there, just to see if there's any questions, and then we can go from there. I can of course talk about budget and stuff like that, but that's usually when people start to fall asleep on this.
Thank you, Thomas. We do have a question. Student X, they would like to know how and if the Tallahassee local government affects the Florida's electoral colleges for the election.
That's a good question. So actually, we don't explicitly, but one of the ways that we do, and something that we were engaged in very heavily, was getting folks to fill out their census, to participate in the census, which happens every 10 years. The Constitution requires that all persons in the country should be counted, right? So that means everybody, regardless of your immigration status or whatever, every person should be counted. And we think that's really important. And it's especially important because it determines the way that funding from the federal and state government can get allocated. So that means that if people in Tallahassee are really lax and say only 60% of the people fill out the census, but people over in Gainesville are more on top of it, and 80% fill out the census, it's going to look like Gainesville has more people than us and they need more resources, so they may get more money than us. And in Tallahassee, we don't want that, right? We want to beat Gainesville every opportunity we can. So it's really important. So it matters for funding, right? Just actual money, real money. It matters for representation in Congress, right? So we have two chambers in Congress. We have the Senate, which gives every state 2 representatives, and we have the House of Representatives, which gives different states different numbers based on population. And so the every 10-year census affects that. And it also affects, as the questioner kind of rightly understands, it affects the allocation of votes in the Electoral College. And so we don't have a direct influence on that, but we were heavily engaged throughout the months that the census was open. I think it just closed last week. Throughout the months that was open, getting individuals in Tallahassee and Leon County to fill out the census, so that we get a good, accurate representation of what the population here is, and the breakdown of that population, the demographic makeup of that population, because that's all really important for funding and all these other things. And it's important data for us to have so that we can know what does the population look like, what are the needs, and how can we continue to better serve those needs. That's a great question.
Thank you for that. We have another question. It says, what does your day-to-day look like as a chief of staff to the mayor? But to backtrack on that question, could you explain what a chief of staff is, just for those who may not know? They may have heard the term, but may not know what it really is.
Yeah, that's great. So I don't know a good way to explain it. I mean, the reality is, and some people may have heard this term before. I'm a big fan of The West Wing, right? They just had this big reunion show. I'm a huge fan of The West Wing, and actually the ringtone on we have to have separate personal and city phones. The ringtone on my city phone is the West Wing theme song, right? And so you can think of President Bartlett, talking about saying that someone serves at the pleasure of the president, right? So in the most basic sense, my job as chief of staff is I serve at the pleasure of the mayor. And that means that if the mayor's happy with me, things are good. If the mayor's not happy with me, things are not good. And essentially what I do is I make sure that the mayor's, that his wishes are carried out, right? And so a significant portion of that is running the office. So we have a small staff in the mayor's office, running that both internally and externally with our staff here, making sure that kind of the day-to-day operations of the office run well. And then, it's different levels of government, and it's different with different elected officials and their chiefs of staff. But I also do a lot of kind of policy work for the mayor, obviously advising the mayor on a lot of those issues, doing a lot of policy research and development for the mayor. And then we spend a lot of time, going out to events together, talking with people, and in a lot of ways can just kind of serving as an extension of the office of the mayor to the community. So if people have an issue and they want to talk to the mayor, we can certainly make that happen. We can set up a meeting, but it's just as effective and sometimes more effective to just talk with me about the issue, right? Because my job is to make sure things get done, right? And that's so the mayor can devote his time to things that make more sense for the mayor to devote his time to, and I can kind of dig down in the details and just make sure that we accomplish what needs to be accomplished. But the thing, the day-to-day question is a great question, and that's probably one of the things that I like the most about this job is that every single day is different. And that's not an exaggeration. So I've been in this job for just about 2 years now, and I've not had 2 days that look the same. And so that may mean, last week we had a public meeting. It was a joint comprehensive plan meeting between the city and the county, which sounds super boring. It was much more interesting than that. It lasted until almost 11:30 at night, right? So I got home after midnight that night, and was up starting early the next morning at 7 or 7:30 again on the phone, right? And that's normal. But the issues change, right? So we could be doing comprehensive planning like that. We could be, this morning we got to break ground on City Farm TLH, a new kind of urban farm incubator that the city is kicking off down in the Bond neighborhood right beside FAMU. So that's the thing that I like about it, is that I get to do so many different things, right? Get to talk about, I know more about utilities than I ever hoped to know in my life, right? But getting to understand, okay, so we have these solar panels. What does that mean? How much power do we generate from that? How much can our system actually hold according to federal regulations? And so I get to talk about solar farm. I get to talk about urban farming. We get to go to events that the mayor's invited to speak at, where we're talking about issues of maybe racial injustice, or we're talking about policing issues, right? You just get to do absolutely everything. And so I think that's what's fun about it. You kind of, the adrenaline is constant. Look, you work a lot. That's the nature of this job. I think, people say, so, I definitely heard a lot growing up, do something that you love and you'll never work a day in your life. I think it's actually the opposite of that. I think you find something that you love, all you do is work, right? For good or bad. So you figure out that balance. But a typical day, we spend time in the office working with our staff here. I work very, very closely with the city manager who runs the day-to-day operations. He and I work very closely, making sure that we're kind of staying in touch and addressing all the issues that need to be addressed. And then we spend a lot of time out in the community, less so now with the pandemic than we like to, but the mayor likes to be out in the community a lot. So in normal times, he does a lot of events, and it's not uncommon for us to have, a half a dozen public events on any given day for the mayor. So it's really varied. So that's a good question. Kind of what's a typical day look like, because there is no typical day.
Thank you for that. We have another question. What have been some of your successes, and what have been some of your challenges in your term of for and you in terms of public policy issues? Sorry about that.
No, that's a good question. I'll tell you the biggest one is, and I've got this right here. I'm gonna reach across my computer, so I'll just hold this picture up. This is my son. Of course, he's representing the TLH hat, right? So his name is Davis. So he's a year and a half now. But once the mayor got elected, I don't remember exactly the timing, either shortly before or shortly after, we're looking at different city policies and realized we have a maternity leave policy. We don't have a leave policy for fathers. And we thought that was wrong. And so the mayor and I got to work, and we kind of began drafting a parental leave policy that would include fathers, and got that passed. It wasn't in time for me to enjoy it, but I have the flexibility in my job that I can make things work. And so we passed a parental leave policy at the city, so it covers all of our city employees. that mother or father, whether it's a live birth or an adoption, you can get 6 weeks paid leave to spend time with the new addition to your family, to bond as a family, to figure out what life is like now, because it throws everything upside down. And what I tell people is that I have the flexibility where I can make it work. My wife has a more flexible job as well, and so we have that. We're kind of blessed that way. But the folks that work for the city, that come get up every day and they work hard and they make $12.50 an hour, they don't have the flexibility. They can just take a couple of weeks off unpaid, right? I mean, and nobody should have to. And so I think that was one of the things we did early on that I'm really proud of. And so at least internally, we didn't officially name it this, but internally we named it after my son. We named it the DavisWhitley Act, right? So so I think that's something that we're really proud of, right? Because we deal with a lot of issues. We address a lot of citizens' issues that they have. If they have, don't get their garbage picked up or whatever, we get to do those things every day that help people. And that's really why we're here, right? Is can we put policies in place, and can we provide a level of service delivery that helps people, right, and addresses their needs. And so that's what we try to do on our best days. We're able to do work like that. And then challenges. I mean, look, it's just hard. I mean, there's it can be overwhelming, right? I think this summer has kind of put that into stark contrast for a lot of people, where we have a global pandemic that can only be dealt with on the global and the national level. But we worked really hard and continue to with our local healthcare providers and our local experts here. We stood up a drive-through testing facility, one of the first in the state, to test for COVID-19 right here in partnership with some local healthcare officials. And so we were dealing with that this summer. We're obviously dealing with protests. I would imagine a lot of your students are aware that this year, earlier in the year, we had 3 separate officer-involved shootings. They all went to a grand jury. And so we were dealing with that, which is the grand jury did ultimately clear all 3 of them. But that doesn't mean that doesn't take away the pain and the trauma that people felt. And so, we deal with that. And so it can all be kind of overwhelming, right? So you have to deal with a lot, but I think the important thing is you got to keep your eye on, okay, what are we here to do, and what are the ways that we can make that happen? And it's like there's politics involved, and sometimes there's politics involved and things where you wish it weren't, but that's just the reality of life, right now. And so we deal with that. So sometimes you get what you want, sometimes you don't. But that's what you do, right? You compromise. And I think that's what we're missing at the national level. But that's what I think historically we've been really good at the local level of, let's come together, let's hash it out, let's try to come up with a solution that can help people and that we can all kind of live with, and then wrap our arms around at the end.
Thank you. You mentioned the recent protests that have been taking place. Question is how, because it's like a twofold with us in Tallahassee being state and local, but since we're dealing with local, how have the protests affected the local government and the way officials view what's going on, what's taking place?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it always does, right? So there, the mayor, he says this a lot when he talks to people, is that the First Amendment to the Constitution gives us 5 rights, and we can usually rattle off the first 4 pretty quickly, right? Freedom of press, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, and freedom of assembly, right? And so the protests would fall on that. But the 5th one I think is really important, and it dovetails with that, which is the right to redress your government. Right, so it's the right to tell your government when you think they're not doing a good job, or you can tell them when you think they are, but we don't hear that very often, right? But it's the right to tell your government you're not doing a good job, and I want you to change. Sometimes we'll agree with that, and sometimes we won't. But it's a fundamental right which we value, and so we absolutely hear the protesters. We hear a lot of other people who don't go out marching in the streets or on the sidewalks or in front of City Hall that are also reaching out to us. From all across the community. And so, yeah, it definitely, I can assure you that your local government leaders are hearing that, and that change is happening, right? So, I mean, just since the protest started here in the wake of the George Floyd killing, I'm part of a small group with our chief of police that's meeting with some students over at FSU that requested it. So we're meeting with them and some of their faculty and their police chief to address some of their concerns. And one of the things that's coming out of that is an officer report card. That's kind of what we're calling it, right? So that you could go online. We're still trying to get the tweak it, get it finalized, ready for public consumption. But you can go online and you can look at officers and you can essentially see a report card, right? How have they had, an excessive number of complaints of, an excessive use of force against them? If they have, we probably already addressed it, but it's still we want to be transparent and let the public know that, right? So that's come out of specifically some of these conversations that grew out of some of the early protests. Also, we're working on changes to TPD has an app, right? So we're working on some changes to that that can help make citizens more comfortable as they're interacting with law enforcement, right? So adding some recording capabilities and things like that. And obviously the commission passed recently a civilian police review board, citizens police review board, to review incidents after, if they've gone to a grand jury, review them after that. And so I think we've seen actually a lot of changes happen as a direct result of the protests that we've had. Of course, not everybody's always going to be happy. We get that, right? But I think that we've moved forward kind of in some really constructive ways that, likely wouldn't have happened or wouldn't have happened as quickly without the protest.
Thank you. Next question is, like you stated, not to say it begins with the local government, but local government is the accessible individuals, elected officials that the residents have access to. How would you, we're looking at Leon County, so all your bigger cities, I know they have different ways of getting in contact with their elected officials. How would someone, Leon County resident, be able to get in contact with an elected official? Well, I know right now we're in that COVID stage, so it's no more in person, being able to go to a city meeting or a county meeting and sit and have a discussion or a conversation. So how would someone get in contact with their elected officials?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so, I mean, the simplest way is to go on the websites, right? So the city's website is talgov.com. The county's website is leoncountyfl.gov. And there are links to each of the commissioners on there, and you can send them an email directly. And so I think that that's the easiest way. Send an email. If you want to, you send an email and say, hey, I want to try to set up a meeting with the mayor. We're going to do everything we can to set that up. We don't run any of the other commissioners' offices, so we can't speak for how they will all respond. But the vast majority of them, I mean, that's why they ran, and that's why they serve, is because they want to be engaged with the community and they want to represent the entire community. And the best way to do that is to continue to hear from the community. So sending emails is good, and you can still watch the meetings that haven't been in person because of COVID, but they will start to be in person again. The city's city commission meeting next week on October 28th will be in person because the governor, it's kind of confusing, but the governor early on issued an executive order saying, essentially giving us the ability to meet virtually. He has now taken that away. And so by November 1st, everybody will have to be meeting in person again. So we'll be meeting in person. We'll have appropriate, COVID protocols in place, but you could come to a meeting, you can watch it. We always stream, and the county does too, on our Facebook pages. So you can stay informed that way, and see what's going on. But that's what we try to do, certainly in our office, is be engaged, speak with any group that wants to, answer any questions that people have. If we can set up a meeting, we do. You probably can't call us today and say, I want to meet tomorrow. We're probably not going to be able to make that happen from a scheduling standpoint, but we're certainly going to work to make that happen. But the easiest way is just go to the website, and there's a link for all of them, just to send them an email directly.
Thank you.
And I can tell you they read those emails. All right. I mean, look, if you're emailing your member of Congress, I don't know if the member of Congress reads the email, right? I can tell you the mayor is reading his email. And he or if not him, then somebody in the office responds to as many as we can. We have a rule in our office that we really try to abide by, which is a 24-hour rule. So if you contact our office within 24 hours, we're going to try to get back to you. We may not have your answer if you've asked us a specific question, but to let you know, hey, we got it, we're working on it, we'll get back with you. So we try. We don't always meet that, but we try really hard to be as responsive as possible, because we are the government that's closest to the people, and that's, I think, what people expect and what they deserve.
Thank you. So as we enter today being early voting day, just to talk about some of the items on the ballot that relate to local government, and local meaning Leon County, that is, for our local residents that are registered to vote here in Leon County. Just to go over like a brief of the local government items, or those elected officials, those officials that are looking to be elected for those certain slots, so that they understand, not to say to go into detail about their role, but a brief about their role and what their role.
Yeah. Yeah, so the first thing I would say is, early in-person voting starts today, Monday, October 19th, and it runs through November 1st. And so if you're registered in Leon County, and it's like that in most counties, but not every county around the state, but if you're registered in Leon County, you can vote in person beginning today if you haven't already voted by mail. If you requested and received your vote by mail ballot, you can still turn that in up until Election Day, but it has to be turned in by 7 p.m. on Election Day. Or you can go to your polling place, your precinct, on Election Day. I think that we have 10 different in-person early voting sites that are open, I think 10 to 6, generally every day. So there's a lot of opportunities to go vote. Today is also the first day that we're not doing a whole lot this year because of COVID, of City Government Week, which we kind of, we did a little bit more last year, but Florida City Government Week, where we kind of talk about, local government across the state. So it's, fortuitous that we're doing this on the first day of City Government Week too. And then I would say you can always go to leonvotes.org if you are a registered voter in Leon County, and check your voter registration, check where the early voting sites are, look at the candidates. You can look where your polling place is. If you send in a ballot by mail, if you voted by mail, you can track your ballot on there, put in your information, it will tell you when your ballot's been counted, to give you a little bit of peace of mind there. So I think those are all really helpful tools. And what some folks may not know is that, because we typically think of elections and on the way we think of national elections, right? So we think of presidents and Republican and Democrat is run. So we think about them as partisan elections. Well, a lot of the elections here locally are nonpartisan. So the elected official may be registered for one party or the other, but they run as a nonpartisan, right? Because the reality is there's no Republican or Democrat way to pick up your trash, right? Or to make sure the electricity works so that when you flip the switch, the light actually comes on. And so we think that's important. Do try to kind of, as much as possible, keep those kind of partisan politics out of just serving, engaging in service delivery for the city. And so that means that, you may end up having, particularly in a city like Tallahassee, which is 2-to-1 Democrat, multiple Democrats running against each other in primary, and you may end up having 2 Democrats that make it through to the general election. So we had the primary in August, and you can see we like to conserve, so my light turns off every few minutes if I'm not moving enough. But so some people won, they won outright because they didn't have a challenger, right? Or some people won outright in the August primary. If there were more than 2 people, you just have to get more than 50% of the vote. So some people won those elections outright in August. And then some went to the general election. So for the general election coming up on November 3rd locally, you'll be able to vote for your superintendent. So the superintendent of schools. So you've got Rocky Hanna, who is currently superintendent and running against Pam Hightower, who is challenging him, has made it through to the general. On the county commission, there are 2 seats that are going to be on the November ballot. You've got one of the district commissioners, District 4, which is Brian Deloge. He's currently the chair of the county commission, and the gentleman who's challenging him is a guy by the name of Brian Welch. And then you have an at-large seat, which is open because Commissioner Mary Ann Lindley is retiring and not running for re-election. So her seat was open. So anybody could run for it countywide. And so you've got Carolyn Cummings versus Kellyati in the general election. It was a large field that got winnowed down, and the top two moved on to the general. So that's the county. And then at the city, there's one election that's still up in November, and that's seat 2, which is Curtis Richardson, who's currently on the city commission. And the challenger that made it through the general to him is a man by the name of Bill Shack. So those are there will be some community development districts we talked about earlier, Piney Z, Southwood and stuff. But if you don't live in those communities, those won't be on your ballot. So you don't have to worry about those. There is a Leon County Soil and Water Conservation District vote on there. I think that is Kyle Frost versus James Billingsley. And then we have some constitutional amendments, which are statewide, and then locally we have one local referendum, which is the Children's Services Council, which I'm happy to talk about more. But that essentially would be voting yes or no to establish a Children's Services Council, which could add a small property tax for a dedicated funding source to address children's issues, so prenatal through 18 years of age. So that's the only local referendum, and then we have the statewide constitutional amendments. There are 6 of those. If we wanted to talk about some of those too.
Thank you. I have 2 questions. First question is, does it matter where you turn in your mail-in ballot? Say if your local polling place is in a different county other than Leon County.
Yeah, if your local polling place is in a different county other than Leon County, I would think that would mean that you're registered to vote in that county. So then you'd want to make sure if you got a vote by mail ballot, probably the simplest thing instead of driving to the other county is just drop it back in the mail and send it back. Put a stamp on it. I will tell you here locally, I don't know how every other county does it. It requires a stamp, but the post office will still deliver it without a stamp. Because the supervisor of election does have a fund to specifically pay the postage for those that happen to come in without a stamp. So we'll still get through, but you should probably put a stamp on it if you can. So if your local polling place is in another county, then that would mean you're registered to vote there. So you'll need to either go there on election day, go there for their early voting days, or if you have a vote by mail ballot, just drop it in the mail and send it back. And I know that's the case for a lot of students, right, who maybe still registered, where they came from, but they spend their time up here instead of thinking about here. But if they haven't changed their registration to be registered here in Leon County, then you want to make sure that you still vote where you are registered.
Okay, thank you. Next question is, do you have any internship opportunities for students who would like to gain experience in local public administration?
That's a good question. We have a really, I think, great internship program here at the county. At the city. The county does one too. Ours will be slightly different this year because of COVID, of course, like everything else. But we do, and you can intern. We have 2 interns currently in the mayor's office, and a couple of the commissioners' offices have an intern. But there's a lot of opportunities all throughout the city, right? So if you're interested in public administration, or you're interested in utilities, or the Parks and Rec department, or sustainability, right? We have an office of sustainability where you get to do cool things like plant and plant an urban garden, right? That's under our office of sustainability. Or if it's waste management, or in Star Metro or bus system, whatever it is, right? So we offer internships all across city government, which I think is really good because it can give you exposure to kind of what's it really like if I want to end up working in local government. What might it be like? Because the fact of the matter is most people aren't going to and probably don't want to do what I do. Most people, I think, probably want a job where they're not getting yelled at all day, right? So I would encourage you to do something else in city government other than what I do. But there's a lot of good opportunities. The internship program is a good way to do that. And so our internship program is run through our HR department, and I think that we should start putting information out about that soon, because I think that individuals will start applying in the fall to start in January.
Okay, thank you. That was going to be my next question, but you answered it. All right, awesome. Let's see. I I don't think there are any more questions coming in. Um, so we'll give it a couple of seconds and see. Is there any additional information that you would like to share from a local government standpoint, that students not familiar with government or just haven't geared their brain, their mind, set their mind on being focused on government right now at this point? Because I ran across a student that did mention that to me, and I just want to, like, this the purpose of this is to inform them and give them information about each level of government, just to bring them back to, not to say reality, but bring them down to earth, to reality. Understand that local government is important, state government, and federal government is important, and this is why.
Yeah, no, I think it's a great question. I think that, so there's a popular saying that is attributed to Tip O'Neill, that he said years and years ago that all politics is local. And what he meant by that is, even when you're running nationally, that the issues are local issues fundamentally. Now, some would argue, and I would probably agree with that now actually all politics is national, right? So even local races get nationalized in ways that I don't frankly think are appropriate. But what I think the importance of that, and where that still kind of rings true for me, is that when we're talking about affordable housing issues, that gets implemented at a local level. Now, it requires state and federal funding, but it gets implemented at the local level, right? We're talking about issues of, folks that are experiencing homelessness. We're talking about utility issues, or even with, climate change issues, right? So the city government here, we passed a resolution last year to move the city to 100% net clean renewable energy by 2050. Right, so we have already achieved as a city. If we were a country, we would have already achieved met the standards for the Paris Climate Accord. Right, so we're doing really good things as it relates to green energy and sustainability and climate change. Right, so all of these things that we may think of, maybe issues that we think are really important, they all kind of, the rubber meets the road on the local level. And that's what I think is important. So we can look at, national policies and state policies. And of course, we want to get those right? And they need to be right. And there needs to be funding there for those policies. But the vast majority of them get implemented at the local level. And so I think that's important. And that's why your local leadership matters, because, how that gets implemented matters. How the affordable housing, dollars are allocated matters. Right. And I think we're doing a decent job. We don't have a say over how all that money that's spent here locally gets allocated, but a portion of it. So I think just a reminder that the decisions made in local government affect your day-to-day life much more than the decisions made on the state or the federal level do. Now, that's not to minimize the decisions that state and federal governments can make, that frankly local governments typically don't engage in, related to kind of basic fundamental human rights, right? And so we talk about that a lot, and we're actually working on some stuff, kind of the repositioning human rights as local as well. But we don't make Supreme Court decisions, right, about whatever those issues are. So there are certainly decisions that can be made at different levels that affect your life, but just kind of the day-to-day, how you live your life, it's the local government and the decisions that are made on our level that are typically going to have the most impact on you. And so I think that's the important thing. It is not as it's not as sexy sometimes as national politics, but it's also not as nasty, right, and not as divisive as national politics. And I think that's a good thing. Right. I think that that we don't have to think that somebody who has a different policy position from us is a fundamentally evil person. Right. And we typically are able to get around that on the local level because we know the people. Right. Like I said at the beginning, you can see the mayor shopping for groceries in Publix. Right. If you do, he's probably going to have talked to 15 other people, and he'll talk to 15 more people before he leaves. So he has to, budget 2 hours to go pick up a gallon of milk. Right. But that's the beauty of local government. Right. And so I think that's That's important. Just kind of realizing the impact that local government has, and that you can be involved, right? So, follow the city commission meetings, follow us for what we're doing. If you have questions, reach out. There are no dumb questions. Just because, you haven't had the experience that somebody else has, doesn't mean that, hopefully you won't let that be a barrier to your getting involved. And then find a way to get involved, right? And to serve through something, an initiative that we have, or something else that we can help plug you in. I think that's when we're doing our job well as a community, is when everybody's kind of plugged in, they know what's going on, and they found a way that they can serve, how big or small, how, they can serve the community.
Thank you so much. Well, I guess they are questioned out. So I would like to thank you for your afternoon, Thomas, for sharing that information about local government and your role as chief of staff for the mayor. That being said, this day one of Civic Education series virtual is coming to an end. Tomorrow we'll have state government, and we'll be blessed to have Miss Candace Grouse to talk about state government, our very own, I should say, Candace Grouse, to talk about state government. But if students wanted to get in contact with you, Thomas, is there a way that they can get in contact with you if they have any follow-up questions or want to know more about your role or how to get involved with local government?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. My email, that's the best way, is Thomas, THOMAS, .Whitley, WHITLEY, at talgov.com. So feel free to send me an email. That's the easiest way to get in touch with me. Whether I should or not, I check it at all hours of the day and night. So I will see your email if it comes through, and get in touch with you that way.
Thank you. And like Thomas said, local government is that government that you have access to. So how many people could say they have access to the chief of staff for the mayor's office right here? And then TCC Student Life presenting the opportunity, or providing you with the opportunity to have a direct contact. So please feel free to contact him if you have any questions or want to know more about his role or local government questions. Once again, I want to thank you, Thomas, for coming out, for spending your afternoon sharing this information with us. We will be in contact. I have a lot of ideas just based off of some of the projects and developments that you just mentioned in this session, that we wanted to do, and maybe that we can get that support like we've been getting from the mayor, to come, well, hopefully come to campus, or if not, we'll get them on a Zoom to talk about these developments and projects that are coming about. So once again, I thank you for your afternoon, and students, thank you for chiming in and taking the time out of your busy day to spend time with us to learn more about local government. Thank you, and you all have a great rest of the day.